What's up, everybody? Welcome to the AllSooners Podcast. It is Wednesday. It is November. No, we made it through October. The first 2 months of the season are behind us. November 1st, this is episode 218 of the AllSooners Podcast. Ryan Chapman joins us from Oklahoma City. I'm John Hoover. I'm somewhere in Tulsa. Not going to tell you where. I don't need you knocking on my door. Close to Broken Arrow, we'll put it that way. Is that all right? Is that specific enough for you guys? Randall's going to join us in the third segment, talk about Bedlam, as well as the latest in the world of recruiting. But before we get to that, we need to recap one more time the 5.5 hours of misery that was Oklahoma at Kansas. That includes an hour of rain delay in the middle, or lightning delay.
Yeah, it was cold. We finally, I think about today, Eddie and I both were thawed out. Eddie obviously was much more in the line of fire alongside Randall. Those guys both down on the field. Finally got thawed out. Looking forward to some mid-70s, really nice weather forecast ahead for Bedlam. But yeah, I mean, we got to talk to Brent Venables on Tuesday, boss, and there's still just one or two really head-scratching things that I think that even Oklahoma doesn't have answers for spinning out of that Kansas game.
Yeah, I'll give you guys a quick recap. You all seem to really enjoy our misery when we do these things, so I'll give you all a quick recap. We were not. We were the last ones out of the stadium, were we not?
Yeah, it was us and the OU Daily crew that were
Okay,
moving
that's right.
around
That's right. Yeah, as we were getting on the elevator, there were still a couple of guys left from the OU Daily. So thankfully, we were not the last ones out. We were, however, the last ones probably to our car because we took the long way around campus, 80% of it uphill, because we had to get to the parking garage. It was hilarious. These guys, Randall and Ryan, were lifting my giant wagon full of AllSooners equipment, carrying it up steps because we took the wrong sidewalk. One sidewalk's just kind of a sidewalk. The other one's got like steps and more steps and more steps. I'm like, oh my God. So they're the real MVPs. They're the hero of the operation for picking that thing up and carrying it. And nobody fell in the mud this time. That's
Well,
always a good thing to report.
nobody fell in the mud, but for my troubles, we almost had an incident. Like, we got all the way to the parking garage. Lawrence, very hilly, all that
Yeah.
stuff. So water's flowing. And as we're crossing the last sidewalk over into the parking garage, I'm thinking we made it. No one splashed us. That was a concern. Is anyone just like a couple of blind corners? So a car that was going a little too fast might splash us. None of that. I almost skid in the middle of the road and fall. I don't fall. I stay up. There's no extra splashing. It was a weird, like, wet spot, though. And as we were all preparing about to drive home, my first thought was that ice? And if it was ice, I want to be sure to warn everybody, like, hey, we were not expecting this, but there's a little bit of ice. Be careful. I turn around. It was not ice. It was not mud. It was an unidentified plop of what I think was once, at some point during the day, a squirrel. But due to the fact that it was like right where your tire rolls in the lane, it had been kind of beaten down in the wet. I literally almost slipped and fell into roadkill. So that we avoided that, but I think that AllSooners would have never gone to Kansas again if in a 3-year span we had tussled with the hill in Manhattan and then I had literally fallen banana peeled into roadkill.
There was no need to disrobe. And when we got to the car, thankfully, although we were all soaking wet, it rained on us the entire time. Seriously, it was a long hill, long, tall hill. And we went the long way around campus and came back around. It was like, what did we do? We find ways to reroute ourselves even when we're not using GPS. It was fine. We were soaked when we got back to the car. Found a plastic bag though, kept the equipment dry. That was good. So
Clutch.
Not a total loss. Thanks to the good people at KU for hooking us up with the parking, the credentials, the directions, the recommendations, all that good stuff. Every time I've ever gone to Kansas, it's been rough weather-wise, and there's always been something funky going on, but the good people of Kansas are the best.
On top of it, kept us warm during the weather delay. But
right.
I think, unfortunately for Oklahoma fans, they're not going to be too worried about that, as Oklahoma's last trip to Kansas ended with a goalpost in Potter Lake. And now you're starting to see a trend The last time Oklahoma played Tech, loss. Last time Oklahoma played Baylor, loss. Last time Oklahoma played Kansas, loss. Last time Oklahoma perhaps will face off against Kansas State, that was a loss. They'll have to right the wrongs against West Virginia, TCU, and they'll obviously have a chance against Oklahoma State this weekend to make sure that Oklahoma closes the Bedlam series out with a win. But the 8 left behind, a lot of them are getting their laughs at Oklahoma on their way out.
Yeah, it's been literally a generation since Oklahoma lost to Kansas, and it's been longer than that. It's been 2 generations. Well, I was in high school, guys. I was in high school. Look how old I am, right? I was in high school the last time KU beat a top 6 team at home, top 10 team at home, something like that. And that was Oklahoma. Kansas beat Oklahoma 28-11. I remember that game very well because Danny Bradley got hurt. Troy Aikman got his first career start, and he was terrible. And it was not all on him, but yeah, KU was solid, and Oklahoma was very good that year. Very good, almost national championship good. But you take away Danny Bradley, the option wizard that he was on that day, and they had no chance. So rough day 40 years ago, and a rough day 4 days ago or 5 days ago now for the Sooners. Ryan, so much went on in that game. And we're not going to sit here and like beat a dead horse. We know you guys have heard every podcast between Sunday and now, and there's a lot of great people making a lot of great points. So we're not going to try and piggyback off of those guys. We're not going to try and steal their thunder. But I will say, great work, great point by Gabe Eichert, as always, when he broke down the passing game. First 75 plays of Oklahoma's offensive game the other day. Dillon Gabriel threw down the field 10 yards or more 2 times. Unconscionable. It's unforgivable. How do you do that? How do you go through almost an entire game until the last drive when you need to, go down the field and score? How do you throw it downfield 2 times when you're Oklahoma and that's been your strength? Not running the football, which they did great, by the way, Saturday. Not throwing short stuff, which has been kind of a coin toss sometimes when they try that. It's either very good or very bad. But throwing the ball deep has been their strength. And you only did it 2 times. Brent Venables said yesterday, Ryan, and we can pull this apart a little bit. You and I think and agree, I think that Jeff Lebby was way, way too conservative. Brent Venables said yesterday he wants to maintain an aggressive mindset. The opportunities were there.
Yeah, I think that is probably as close as you're going to get to Brent Venables saying there was an error in the offensive game plan. I think that he's not going to come out there and blast his own coordinator or anything like that, but I think that you pair that quote, Hoove, based with another line that he had. I don't remember if it was the same answer or another answer piggybacking off of that on Tuesday where he talked about, and oh, by the way, if you're able to throw the ball down the field, that helps to continue to open up the run game. Brent Venables maintained that you need to still have great balance. Oklahoma had no balance on Saturday. It was run. And then when Tommy Walker left the game, Javonte Barnes had a chance to cut back in. I think it was the second down play maybe. And as Brent Venables said on his coach's show on Monday night, he'd still be running. Instead, that was a hole opened up, by the way, between Jacob Sexton and Caden Green on the left side of Oklahoma's line. Instead of following, going in between the guard and the tackle, bounces outside, gets tackled by the linebacker. That's what you get when you have a guy that is getting carries that hadn't carried the ball since Tulsa. So that's got to be something Oklahoma's got to figure out. I mean, again, Jason Bean threw the ball 32 times. The conditions were bad. They weren't so bad that it was like you're worried about a fumble every time a guy drops back. Dillon Gabriel's talked about, like, growing up in Hawaii, it rained like every Friday night. So the cold, not something he's used to. The rain, that shouldn't have been an issue. So, yeah, they got to figure that out. And I don't know who, maybe you have a thought on this of, instead of Jalil Farouk in the running game, could you get him going as a deep option? People have been able to run behind Oklahoma State. We'll preview Oklahoma State in the second segment for sure, but people have been able to run behind him. Is that an answer? We saw Brennan Thompson pop up on that last drive. Throw him out there a couple of times, see if he can't get going, or if not, just there was that big almost 20-yard pass play to Nick Anderson, and you thought, okay, there's Nick Anderson. Can he get that thing going? The middle of the field's open, and nothing ever built off of it. So those have got to be the questions. Those have got to be the concerns. It sounds like on Sunday the staff got together and there were for sure conversations about what are we doing here? Who do we need to get the ball? All that stuff. We'll see if that pans out and if Saturday becomes a learning experience. If so, you hate that it happened. You want it back, obviously, but if you learn from it, it's a lot easier pill to swallow than if we see a lot more conservative game calling on Saturday in Bedlam.
Yeah, I'm not breaking any new ground here, but what it looked like to me, real time, as the game was unfolding, was Dylan was way off on his first throw, way off. And he was just enough off on his second throw that it was a pick six going the other direction. And at that point, Jeff Lebby became very gun shy because we all know Jeff and the staff reads All Sooners copy and listens to the All Sooners podcast, or maybe they watch it on my YouTube channel. They understand that over the past 20-something months, 22 months, that Dylan Gabriel has displayed, and not just that, but going back to his days at UCF, he has displayed that he's not real good in cold weather, in wet weather, in windy weather, West Virginia, and so on and so forth. So I think Jeff probably said, let's try these. Oh my gosh, we're down 7-0. Okay, well, I was afraid of that, right? I was afraid Dylan was going to struggle today because of the elements. So let's go to the run game. Let's only have Dylan go 14 of 19 passing instead of, 26 of 30. They just didn't trust him anymore. That's something that I don't know. I don't know if you've got a Heisman Trophy candidate, first few weeks of the season, first 6 weeks, 7 weeks of the season, he was one of the most efficient and productive quarterbacks, prolific quarterbacks in the country. And you run into a little adversity in Kansas, a couple of bad throws, bad weather, pick six. You basically take the ball out of his hands. Your receivers, as we've noted every week, Ryan, your receivers are the best part of this offense. And you remember my comment like midway through the third quarter, Drake Stoops hasn't really been much of a impact in this game. No receiver was an impact in this game. Nobody had. I think Drake was the leading receiver with 2 catches at the time. So that's really, really out of character. When you talk about an offensive identity, what is Oklahoma's offensive identity? It just seems totally out of character for Oklahoma to say, we're going to run it 55 times and only throw it 19. And
7 of those throws in the last drive.
Right. A lot of that came in the last drive. The RPO situation, I've said this for a long time, and I think I've said it poorly enough that I'm going to defer to Teddy Lehman on this one from the Oklahoma Breakdown podcast. He said the RPO is ruining college football. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's basically making offensive linemen unsure of what they have to do, which resets their thinking, their aggressive mentality, and kind of makes them soft. Puts some doubt in the quarterback's mind of what he's looking at, what he's reading. Receivers sometimes don't know what to do. You see a lot more blockers downfield, illegal blockers, illegal men downfield because of an RPO misread or something like that. I don't know. I don't like the identity of your team being an RPO team. If Kansas is giving you the throw and you're still not taking it, you're still only throwing it 19 times.
Yeah, well, I think that when you look at it, Angelo Anthony was really, really good the first 6 games of the year. Was Angelo Anthony a receiver that totally destructs and implodes what your offense is? Like, was he that good? For me, those guys are your CeeDee Lambs, your, D.D. Westbrook, Blitnikoff season.
Mm-hmm.
Guys like that are when you lose them, it totally handcuffs what your offense is. And this is not taking anything away from Angelo Anthony, but he was a total unknown starting this year. And it wasn't like he was racking up 150, 200-yard games every single week. He was really key on third downs. He was a great option to stretch the field. But go back to UCF. Oklahoma didn't stretch the field against UCF either. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it feels like Jalil Farouk's getting more work out of the backfield than he is downfield. And Jalil Farouk, as a runner, it's not like Jalil Farouk is busting off 30-yard runs to be the reason that you need to feed him that. I just think that the last 2 weeks, it's been too cute. completely too cute. And the too cute plus the weather led to what you saw on Saturday. So there's no excuse this week. You've had the soul searching week. You need to eliminate all the jet sweep crap because it's been bad.
Yeah.
Whether it's Farouk or Freeman, you don't need to be running those guys out of the backfield. Gavin Sawchuk exists. Javonte Barnes is apparently magically healthy after we were told that he might be redshirting. Tawi Walker, we'll talk about his availability, but if he's given it a go, run the ball with your running backs plus Dylan Gabriel. Throw the ball downfield to your wide receivers, and there should be no excuse to empty the holster. If you lose against Oklahoma State, try to be too aggressive downfield. I think that it is what it is, and that probably has a lot to do with your inability to tackle Ole Gordon as well, if that's how that plays
out. No doubt. So that's the offense, I think, in a nutshell, the offensive performance, which, again, we went over some of this on Saturday night. We'll get a clearer look at it when we rewatch the game Sunday. I wrote 3,000 words Sunday on just my rewatch of the game. And what I would recommend you guys do is, if you still got it on your DVR, push play, watch it back with me, and look at my recap and my review as the game unfolds. If you got an extra 2.5 hours, you can fast forward commercials and all that stuff. Take a look at my assessment of each drive, basically, and how things went sideways when they didn't really need to go sideways. So that's the offense. Let's dive into some defense real quick. Brent Venables yesterday, great quote. We put on a clinic on how not to tackle, particularly in the first half. That's a reflection on me. My name's all over that. That's not on the players. Does that mean Brent went to the practice schedule last week, Ryan, and said, guys, let's take the tackling element, the tackling segments of the practice. We usually spend 10 minutes on live tackling. Let's take that out. Did Brent go to the coaches and say, we're not tackling this week? We're not going to practice tackling? I seriously doubt it, right? I get what he's saying. That's what a good leader does. A general's going to go back to the president and say, Mr. President, we lost this battle because of me. That's what a good general does. That's what good leaders do. But missed tackles are not on the head coach. I don't think to the extent that what we saw Saturday. It was weird, Ryan. You and I left that game and we're looking at it and we're saying, man, Oklahoma tackled terrible, especially in the first half. The broadcast, it was Fox. Yeah, it was Fox was there. Big noon kickoff. They were saying at some point during the game, Oklahoma's got 5 missed tackles in the first quarter alone. Whoa, that's a lot, right? So when Pro Football Focus released their numbers, they had 9 for the game. And I'm like, that can't be right. I went back and I counted, kept a running total of all the missed tackles I saw in the Sunday review. 13, which is not the worst they've had. They've had 15 against UCF, I think, and 16 against Texas. But 13 is not good. Jaron Kanik did not have a great game at all. Danny Stutzman wasn't having a good game before he got hurt. Fact of the matter is, Ryan, 3 linebackers on this team, Stutzman, Kanik, and Kobe McKenzie. And we'll talk about Kip Lewis in the next segment. But those guys posted their lowest grade of the season, according to Pro Football Focus. By far. I mean, in the 20s and 30s, whereas usually they're in the 70s or 80s. That says a lot.
Yeah, I think that I think where Brent Venables might have been coming from is that he's always said tackling is a mentality, and that's something like Deshaun McCullough talked about. And he believes it's his duty to motivate those guys, have the right mentality. So I think that's where that comes from. Kanik continues to have these issues. He's had them all year long. He's over pursuing. He's tackling high. I would not play him.
He's too amped up.
Yeah, I would not play him more than either Kip Lewis or Kobe McKenzie, which might be controversial. I would use him as the rotation this week because you can't do that against Ole Gordon. Ole Gordon's gonna be dancing in the end zone over and over if that's what happened. I'm just the question, and we had so much stuff to cover that I wasn't able to get back into the queue and all that stuff. But ultimately, I'd like to know up front, did it look less physical because of a Texas hangover like you've talked about and you asked about? We're going to talk about here in a minute, a story that you wrote. Or did it look less physical the last 2 weeks because UCF and Kansas do so much stuff pre-snap that instead of just reading and reacting, those guys are thinking, and then it
Yep.
takes them half a second, and then by that time, Kansas and UCF are in their face, and it looks like they're getting blown off the football. If that's the case, I think we'll know on Saturday, because while Oklahoma State has been really, really good running the ball, it's come because they've simplified things on their end and just said, we're going to be less complicated, make the reads easier for the line, make it easier for Ole Gordon, and they've seen huge results. So I think we'll know that pretty quickly come about 7 p.m. on Saturday. If it's still a mentality, if they're not able to play up to that emotion they play with against Texas, or if it was they're just playing half a step slow against two offenses that are very complicated and had an extra week to prepare for Oklahoma. I think we'll find that out pretty quickly on Saturday.
You make a great point with the number 1 and number 2, Brent Venables told us, deceptive offenses in the country, right? That's why you do that. That's why if you're Gus Malzahn or Lance Leipold, that's why you run that offense, because you can almost upset an Oklahoma by getting them to think too much, getting them outside of their head, getting them outside of their shoes a little bit. And then here a week later, you can host Oklahoma and beat them on your own turf by doing the same concepts, a lot of the same things. So you're making them guess, you're making them slow down defensively. Oklahoma, the first 6 games, was taking the fight to people defensively. This game, these last 2 games, a lot of times they were standing and reading and wondering. I'll give you an example. That 4th down play that Brent said he should have called timeout at the end of the game, the 4th and 6, 7, that turned into a 39-yard pass play, right? Because the guy was wide freaking open. The reason he was wide open is almost at the snap, right before the snap of the football. KU was down, center had his hand on the ball, everybody was in a 3-point stance, the receivers were all looking in at the quarterback, everybody was lined up. You look at the Oklahoma defense, I counted, I freeze framed it, there are 8 guys who are doing this, looking over to the sideline, looking over to the coaching staff, waiting for the signal to come in. They were lost. That's all you got to do. Timeout. Timeout probably saves that situation. Who knows how it ends up, but at least you're not standing there with 8 guys going, what do we do? What do we do? That was rough to watch, because when 1 or 2 guys, they talk about it all the time, when 1 or 2 guys doesn't do their job, oh, it could go to the house, 60 yards to the house. No, this was 8 guys wondering what the hell's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, and we talked about it, not on the podcast, but we saw each other yesterday for the press conference. I was like, you know what it reminded me of? The last 3 years of the Mike Stoops defense, where those guys were just looking over at the sideline, and for all of his faults in year 1 in Alex Grinch, he immediately simplified it. There's the clips that went around of everyone looked at the wristband at the exact same time. Everyone at least knew what the play call was. Mm-hmm. That's what it reminded me of, and that's why, again, not to beat a dead horse or anything like that, Brent Venables after the game talked about, well, I didn't like to give Kansas a chance to draw something up. Fine, that's a fine thought process. If you know what the play is and you just don't execute, when no one knows what the play is, that should have gone out the window. That should never be a consideration. It's a 4th down where you win the game if you get the stop. Make sure that you have guys who know what the call is. And that I just put fully on the coaching staff and fully on Brent Venables. He's the DC and the head coach. That was just him making a bad call.
Yeah. And he acknowledged after the game, he fell on the sword. He said, man, I should have called timeout right there. I wish I had called timeout. Clearly, that would have probably mitigated that situation. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll take a break right here. I've got to get to coming up. We're going to talk about my question to Brent on why the performance drop-off has been so dramatic since the Texas game. Not a Texas hangover, but why the big drop-off? Plus, we'll talk about the college football playoff rankings. We'll talk about injuries. Don't miss that part. You're going to want to know who's playing against Oklahoma State. And we're going to preview that game with the Cowboys. Ole Gordon, holy cow. Alan Bowman is playing quarterback. And far as I can tell, he's the only quarterback that they're playing right now. I've done a little research, right? And first few games they played like every quarterback they have. Last few games they've only played 1. And guess what? They're on a winning streak. Funny how that works out, right? That's all coming next on the AllSooners Podcast. If you're on Twitter, give us a follow at all_Sooners. I'm at John E. Hoover. Ryan, you can find him at _Ryan Chapman. Ross is at Ross Lovelace, and Randall is at Randall Sweet 5. Follow him for all the latest recruiting news. We'll have Randall on later in the show to talk about OU recruiting. The website is AllSooners.com. We're a Fan Nation affiliate, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. All free, no signups, no emails, no passwords, no credit cards needed. All Sooners is all free all the time. This segment of the AllSooners podcast is presented by Infinite Asset Advisors. I have a question for you. How much of your retirement savings are you willing to lose? All of it, some of it, or maybe you'd prefer not to lose any of it, right? If you're nearing retirement or you're already in retirement, the math and the science studies have shown that a few bad market years could absolutely wipe away the kind of retirement that you dreamed of. But there is a way to safely grow your money and not have any market risk. You can even turn your savings into guaranteed lifetime income. I'm in, right? At Infinite Asset Advisors, not only do they help plan for retirement, but they also show you how to become debt-free before you get there. They're experts in financial planning, retirement planning, even estate planning. So all you got to do is visit the website, infiniteassetadvisors.com, to learn more. Email them at team@infiniteassetadvisors.com or just call 512-710-0130. All right, Ryan, let's roll this bad boy. College football playoff rankings. The one everybody wants to talk about, right? Yay! Sooners are number 9. I know, right? This was going to be, if they beat, all they got to do is go on the road and beat Kansas. Go on the road and beat Kansas. First college football playoff rankings come out Halloween. No. Sooners are number 9. I think they probably would have been top 3, maybe for sure top 4 if they had beaten Kansas. I think they had put on a strength of record, not strength of schedule, but strength of record strong enough that the playoff committee was pretty impressed. Instead, they come in number 9, which is 2 spots below Texas, who is 1 spot above Alabama, who lost to Texas by 10 points in Tuscaloosa. So Alabama's 1 spot above Oklahoma. Is it too early, Ryan, you think, to try to make sense of this? First one of these is never accurate, never projects to the last one. But it's a starting place. Is this an appropriate starting place for Oklahoma?
Yeah. You look at Oklahoma's schedule, they have 2 ranked teams that they've played. One of them they lost in embarrassing fashion. The other one they beat. If you look at how polls work, Oklahoma lost more recently than Texas, so they're going to drop below Texas. And really, the playoff committee used head-to-head twice. Washington over Oregon. Washington's also unbeaten. Texas over Oklahoma, or Texas over Alabama, excuse me. That next spot, not the Texas over Oklahoma. You look lower down in the rankings. KU's at 21, OSU's at 22. Guess who won that game? All that stuff. In the end, there are 2 college football playoff rankings that matter. The ones going into conference championship weekend, so you know what you have to do, and the ones that set the playoff. If you're worried about them other than that, just take a chill pill. It's fine. None of this actually matters. It's the theater of college football. I love college football, and I love rankings but look, I've done this before. If you sat me down today, this early in the season, I know it's November 1st, and you gave me a top 25, I guarantee you some of the reasoning I would use for teams in the 6, 7, 8 range, you'd then circle back and be like, but Ryan, at 18, 19, 20, you did this. And I'd be like, yeah, I just think that team stinks a little bit and I have to rank it. Stuff like that. There is no perfect resume versus eye test versus gut versus if Oklahoma won by 3 points or 4 points, even though they won by 4, you said they won by 3 and you killed the AP poll in the process. No, none of that stuff. Don't worry about it. If Oklahoma wins out, they'll have a chance to be there. Because they lost to Kansas, they no longer control their destiny.
So I give you guys a little background here. I was previously an AP voter, AP Top 25 voter. It was a nightmare because as I tend to do with everything in my life, I overcooked it. I overthought it. I watched minimum 10 games a week. And I did it right when the DVR was invented. TiVo had been out for a few years, but then the DVR, the Cox cable thing I had, they provided a digital video. And I'm like, this is amazing. I can watch a game in an hour. So as busy as I am covering the Sooners, right, with the grind and the beat and all the stuff, that was the year that I also voted on the AP polls. I think it was 2005. And so OU had no chance of being in the AP poll because they stunk that year. They were rebuilding. Everybody remembers that was the Rhett Bomar year, and Adrian Peterson hurt his ankle, so they had no chance of being in the top 25. But I voted. I was a conscientious voter every week, and I watched literally minimum of 10 games a week. Would watch the offensive line, the defensive line, who's got control of this game. It's hard. It's harder than you think to you can look at scores and you can look at highlights and you say, I think this team's better. But if you're really going to put your name on something and say, this is my ballot and this is what I believe, you better be fully invested. And I was. And the AP hasn't had me back yet because I was always the last one getting my ballot in because I just wasn't sure about 23 over 24 or should I put 24 over 25? Overdoing it. The other thing is I was on the second ever mock selection committee that you go down and spend a couple of days in Grapevine, Texas with the actual selection committee and Bill Hancock and all those people that are in that room. And they put you literally in the same room as the committee. And they say, okay, we're ranking the top 25. We're going to start with the top 6. Give me your top 6. Give me your next 4. Give me your next 3. Okay, now give me your final 10 or whatever the countdown was. And you break it down. The committee sits down in this room and everybody has their opinions and then everybody votes and then the vote pops up on your screen, right? And then you're sitting there looking at the screen and somebody raises a hand and says, I'd like to discuss numbers 8 through 11. And then somebody will present, here's why number 11 should be ranked above number 10. And here's why number 9 should be ranked above number 8. And then they'll revote on that group. And then they'll revote the whole thing on the top 25. And then somebody else will raise a hand and say, I would like to reconsider number 1 through number 4, because I think number 2 should be number 1 and number 4 should be number 3. And they'll revote again, and they go over this over and over and over. And I thought I was overcooking it, right? So the purpose of this committee is to get each one of these right. And I know, here's the deal. Fact is, they don't get everyone right. It's a very long, drawn out process. They're trying their best. No, I don't think there's anybody corrupt in there. There may be somebody with some built-in biases, but I don't think there's like an agenda. So I don't know. Doesn't matter. Week 1. Sooners are number 9. Fact is, they have a path. Win the rest of your games, win the Big 12 championship. You don't have to be number 1. You just have to be number 4. You're in the playoff.
Let me ask you this. Coming out of the game Saturday, not exact ranking, where did you think Oklahoma was going to end up coming out of the Kansas game?
Well, I told you in the car driving back to that the parking lot that they'll probably fall to number 20. That was an egregious overreaction by me. I never really thought that they would go to 20, but going on the road, losing to Kansas historically is going to drop you a lot. This Kansas team's pretty good. This Kansas team comes in ranked number 22 this week. So, what was realistic? Again, they're not falling from anywhere. They're not climbing from anywhere because this is the first rankings. I think 10 is probably about right.
See, I thought they'd be close to 14, 15, somewhere in there, because they've played nobody outside of Texas. So I think that, if anything, I know that a lot of OU fans latched on to, well, they lost to blah, 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 blah. Again, if Oklahoma gets to where they want to go, they'll play Texas again. It's fine. Or Texas will have lost to Kansas State and somebody else, and Texas will be out of there. So, like, that's not an issue. I truly thought that outside of that game, SMU's not held up. Arkansas State and Tulsa haven't held up. You didn't see an Iowa State who's playing better, all that stuff. So for Oklahoma, you look at the other Big 12 teams, they've played the number 7 team. They lost to 21. They'll play 22 in Oklahoma State this week, and the only way they'll play 23 K-State is in the Big 12 championship game. Otherwise, there is no strength of schedule, not record, to stand on. So if anything, I thought that was a huge positive for Oklahoma to still be in the top 10 after playing about as bad as you could draw it up against Kansas.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying. The fact that they're where's my chart that I had here for just a second ago? The fact that they're ahead of one-loss Louisville, one loss Missouri, and one loss Penn State, and one loss Ole Miss. How much of that is brand recognition? Well, it's Oklahoma, right? Or how much of that is, yeah, but they beat number 3 Texas, which is now number 7 Texas, right? I think both of those play into that. And fair or not fair, whether it's Penn State or Missouri, everybody wants to be up there in the top 10. Oklahoma grabbed that spot. Let's just say it, partly because they have that OU paperclip on the side of their helmet. They have a brand recognition that's going to sell tickets and get eyeballs, right? And not that Penn State doesn't, not that Ole Miss doesn't, not that Louisville or Missouri doesn't. Well, Louisville and Missouri might not so much, right? I'm talking about college football blue bloods here. OU's one of those brands that's going to make money for everybody, and they go back to the 2003 BCS rankings, going all the way back 20 years. Oklahoma always gets the benefit of the doubt in these rankings.
Yeah, and they beat Texas when everybody watched. So if most people have probably watched 2 OU games, and it's probably been Texas and Kansas. So for as bad as Kansas was, they're like, well, when it went right, that's what it looks like. So none of it matters. Like Kirk Herbstreit said on Twitter to an angry Ohio State fan a couple weeks ago, who gives an S? Just win, you'll be there in the end.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the serious stuff, Ryan. We need to talk about injuries. There's 2 big ones, one for the offense, one for the defense, that are iffy, a little bit nebulous this week, a little bit of a gray area. I think I think Danny Stutzman is going to try to play, and I think Tawi Walker is going to play, and I don't know if he's going to be fully effective, but I think both guys are going to give it a go. I think Tawi Walker might be in a little slightly better shape than Danny Stutzman.
Yeah, Brent was asked directly about Danny Stutzman, and he said, Danny feels good. Danny tells him he feels good, but they'll have to see on Saturday. Yeah. The follow-up about Tawi was feel the same way. So in layman's parlance, both those guys, game-time decisions. You're right, though. Just standing around at practice, after practice, we just get to see purely who is suited up, who is not suited up, who is sweating. Like that is literally like what that looks like. Tawi Walker had all of his jersey on the same as everybody else that participated. Looked like he had been the way he was sweating does not look like he just stood on the side and watched everybody all practice. And Stutzman had the protective boot. So Peyton Bowen had the protective boot the last 2 weeks, and he played. Doesn't mean he can't play. But we'll just see. So that puts a lot of focus on Kip Lewis, Kobe McKenzie, those guys. If Danny Stutzman can't go, or if he can't go 100% of the snaps, what are those guys going to do? Because that's who's going to be the other options at the center of the Oklahoma defense to try and slow down Ole Gordon. Gentry Williams back in practice as well. So
I'm sorry, I talked over you. Who was that?
Oh, Gentry Williams is back in. He practiced Monday. He's back in practice as well. Sorry, that's the other one.
That's a pretty big one, Ryan, because Kenai Walker, he actually posted an okay PFF grade, take it for what it's worth. But there were times in that game that Kenai Walker looked absolutely lost, and he's been out with his own injury. He's back, he's playing. You're glad that he's able to get on the field, but especially that keeper by Jason Bean, where he just had no awareness what was happening behind him. He ran for the touchdown right behind him untouched. So Kenai struggling a little bit, maybe at this point of the season or this point of his career. How big is that for Gentry Williams to be back?
I think it's huge because what we just talked about in the first segment about being able to throw downfield and what that could do for you open up in the run game. Think about the exact same thing for Oklahoma State. It's not as explosive of a passing attack at any point this year as what we've seen that Oklahoma can be. But if Presley gets behind the defense and Kenai Walker messes that up, if any of those guys are able to get going, it's going to make life that much harder on Oklahoma. Whereas if they can bottle up Alan Bowman, he's not really a running threat. I really don't think Oklahoma State's offensive line is any good still. Like, I watched them play the first 4 weeks pretty closely. One of the worst units in the conference. They've been more simplified, but Kansas State forced them to kick a ton of field goals. Kansas defensive front stinks. We saw it. Cincinnati, outside of Dante Quillion and Briggs, they stink top to bottom. West Virginia, I don't think they've got any horses that are worth the dang up front either. So this stretch, Ole Gordon's been incredibly impressive. Oklahoma should overmatch Oklahoma State's offensive line. And if Gentry Williams is there and not even making a play on the football, interceptions, that stuff, if they're just staying in front of the Oklahoma State wide receivers, it's going to be on Ole Gordon to do it all himself. He's that good. He can do it all himself. Oklahoma doesn't tackle. But I would pick Oklahoma, and I'd pick Oklahoma to win that comfortably if that's the scenario that plays out. That's a lot of ifs, though. We haven't seen Gentry Williams really play a whole game. Woody Washington can't have bad moments. The safeties, they got to shore that up. I didn't think Key Lawrence had his best game on Saturday. Pearson's going to miss the first half. How healthy's Peyton? Like, that's a lot of ifs that we just got to get to that scenario with Oklahoma. But I think that's more on the table than you think if Stutzman can play and is healthy and all that stuff.
I'm trying to think. Is there any other personnel issues going on right now? Any other question
Marcus
marks?
Major didn't play. Marcus Major is a non-factor at this point. That does not matter to me, frankly.
Marcus Major didn't play against Kansas. May or may not play against Oklahoma State.
I did not
see it.
Real quick, I didn't see Marcus Major dressed out on Monday.
Okay.
I clocked every other running back in there. It was like after practice, they break into their position groups, and they were just stretching. But I checked off every other running back except for 24 with the running backs.
What do you think's going on at the running back position when you bring Javonte Barnes out of a month of injury? He made his Big 12 debut Saturday against Kansas, and he came in with the game on the line. Like, we got to get a first down. Let's give it to Javonte Barnes. You've got an ankle injury to Tawi Walker, obviously. You've got Marcus Major wasn't even there. As far as I know, he might have been there and not suited up. And then Gavin Sawchuk just wasn't real effective, but he had carried the football and has carried the football more recently, several dozen times more than Javonte Barnes. They turned the game over. Two of the three most important plays down the stretch, they turned the game over to Javonte Barnes. At least they didn't turn and hand it to Jalil Farouk, right? If they're going to do that. But what's your read on that situation with the running backs?
Candidly, either DeMarco Murray or Jeff Lebby have lost their mind as far as what, like a week ago, they trusted Gavin Sawchuk to close the game out against UCF.
Yeah.
Tawi Walker in that middle portion of the game where Oklahoma was dominant on the ground against Kansas basically got 100% of the work. So we didn't get to see Gavin Sawchuk run behind Sexton and Green to know if he was going to be more effective against Kansas. I place that at the feet of the coaches, whether it's Jeff Lebby, DeMarco Murray. Those two guys got to chop it up since we can't actually talk to DeMarco during the year, and we only get a couple of minutes with Jeff Lebby a week. And Jeff Lebby is as uninteresting an interview as it gets, win or lose. The only difference is he has a smirk. He does not answer questions. He is mega coach speak. That's the Jeff Lebby experience, and he did not really answer questions on Saturday to shed light. It's we will evaluate everything. Well, Jeff, your evaluations stink this year with the running backs. They've been terrible outside of Tawi Walker, which I think they kind of stumbled themselves into. So I'm not expecting to have any more clarity on Saturday. We'll see if the talks that were had Sunday was a very clear, here is the guy you need to get the ball to in Tawi Walker. And if he's not healthy, here's option B, option C. Because it was not a fair position to put Javonte Barnes in to not have touched the ball since Tulsa and have to close out the game when apparently he was hurt too. So he got some magic spray from the soccer program and got that thing going, I guess. It was not a fair position to put Javonte Barnes in, and he missed a key cut.
Yeah, he did because his I know of no other way to say this, but with air quotes, his eyes were rusty, right? Does that make sense? Like he's not used to seeing the game unfold in front of him at full speed, and he missed that cut, which would have been an easy touchdown. Anyway, let's move on to why you think what really. I don't want to delve too deep into this because it was what it was. It was me asking a question to Brent Venables about the performance drop off since the Texas game, and he took that to mean as a direct question to a Texas hangover, like we beat Texas and now we can't beat anybody, or we're not any good because we put all of our eggs in the Texas basket, so to speak. That wasn't what the question was about. It was more about why the big performance drop off. You guys put so much into that game. Watch the hype videos and the cinematic recap and all this stuff, right? Which were amazing. but they came out and they had a big celebration and they were talking trash about what they're going to say now and who we play now and all this. They have not been the same team. They had a bye week the following week, and they played UCF, then they played Kansas. Part of that may be some of the trickeration of the offenses that we talked about earlier, Ryan, but part of it, I think, is the fact that they walked off that field in the Cotton Bowl saying, "We're back. We, Oklahoma, are back." And I don't know that that's the case, right? I don't think yet in year 2 of the Brent Venables experience that that's the case, but I think the players thought that. They got a wake-up call against UCF, and they didn't wake up because they got beat by Kansas. Now, is Kansas and UCF a real wake-up call for this team?
Has to be. I mean, it has to be. You'd think so. And Brent Venables, when he answered your question, he talked about, hey, you go out there and you force 4 3-and-outs immediately against UCF, one of the most explosive offenses in the country. Is that a hangover? And I thought that was the telling thing, why it's not a hangover, but it's just a bigger issue. And I don't think it's a coaching. I think it's purely the defense was really bad last year, and it's unrealistic to expect them to be a top 10 iron curtain or steel curtain unit that can go out there and just dictate the game for 4 quarters every single Saturday. We saw it against Iowa State. They started the game with the pick 6 and then gave up 4 scoring drives. And the players, not Brent Venables, the players, Danny Stutzman had said, I think we got over to the sideline and just weren't 100% focused because we're like, oh, look, we're playing so well, all that stuff. And they got them locked back in. I think that when you have the early success against UCF plus the Texas game, that's a group that wasn't as focused. And then you add the deception in there, and that's how you get a defensive line that didn't look overly dominant at times. I think that's magnified against Kansas, who is just better than UCF and had the extra week and all that stuff. I think all of that plays into it. I don't know what piece of the pie you want to give to hangover, what piece of the pie you want to give to injuries, what piece of the pie you want to give to – this is still a work in progress, and it's going to be a couple of years until Oklahoma is a defense that you can say they should go and shut everyone down week after week after week for 4 quarters.
Yeah, and Brent started his response with, I think every game is its own thing, its own season or whatever. We have 12 one-game seasons, right? Basically was where he was going. And I interrupted him and I said, yeah, well, you don't think they're connected at all? And then he said, maybe they are, maybe they're not. But the fact of the matter is guys play with emotion. They play this game. This is an extremely emotional game. Just ask Jaron Kanak, right? Who he pointed out again, and he used the words, these are his words, first 3 plays of that UCF game, that goal line stand, we're getting ready to have another goal line stand, we knocked their ass back. That's Brent Venables in a nationally televised press conference using that kind of language, right? So he was a little agitated, and then he said, but then we had a guy who got too emotional. It's an emotional game. Players play with emotion. They play with, you can create from one win to the next week. You can create momentum. I think enough of us have been around this game a long time to be able to see, you see teams like Oklahoma State. Let's just call it right there. See teams come out and absolutely stink it up at the beginning of the season. And frankly, we've seen this before from Mike Gundy, where they come out and they're 2-3 or something like that, or 1-2, and you're like, oh, the season's over. This team's trash. But Gundy coaches them up. They get better over the course of the season, and they're not the same team. That is exactly what happened to Oklahoma State this year. They were absolute garbage 3-4 games into the season, and guess what? Now they're in first place in the Big 12, tied for first place. So, you better strap it on Saturday, right? Strap it up and play some football. Why hasn't Oklahoma gotten better since the Texas game? They've gotten markedly worse since the Texas game. So that's kind of the spirit of the question.
Yeah, and I think you just look at both sides of the ball. I think the offense, we've covered it. Andrew Anthony's hurt, and Jeff Levy, there are questions out there, about how many good games has he really called, and he needs to respond. So I think that, and also just play Caden Green at left guard. End of discussion. That's your offensive issues. Boom, done, dusted. If Tommy Walker's hurt, they're going to have trouble running the ball again on Saturday. Just know it. Defensively, I think it's a tougher conundrum to kind of unravel, and I think we've tried to hit on it a little bit, but we'll find out on Saturday. The last piece is simply this: Oklahoma is going to have to tackle Ole Gordon. Ole Gordon will run over you. He will run around you. He will juke you out. If there's a second of hesitation, Desan McCullough said it. You got to be ready for the smoke, he said this week. When you step into that hole, you cannot hesitate or you will look silly. That last part paraphrasing. That is what the challenge is for Oklahoma this weekend, because they are better up front along the offensive and defensive line than what they will play against. But we've seen if they're not in sync and focused, that has not mattered, because guess what? They were better up front than UCF and they were better up front than Kansas. And they got pushed and lost.
Well, let's talk about Ole Gordon. When this particular podcast, you ever see the movie Contact, Jodie Foster? When this particular podcast gets blasted out into the cosmos, right? The aliens are going to say, he got how many carries last year? Ole Gordon got how many carries last year? 62. What? Yeah, history is going to look back on Ole Gordon's 2022 season and say, how in the hell does this guy get 62 carries in one season? And 29 of those, so half, were over the last two games. Okay, so he grew. He had the off season that he had. He had a great off season, right? He comes back bigger, stronger, faster, more determined than ever. First three games this season, 19 carries. 19 carries Mike Gundy and the Oklahoma State offense, Casey Dunn and those guys, gave to Ole Gordon in the first three games of this season. Then he had 18, gained 121 yards. Then he had 21 for 136. Then he had 29 for 168 and also caught 6 passes for 116 yards. Then he caught 29 for 282. I'm sorry, that was their handoffs, 29 for 282. Then he got 25 for 271. He is now at 1,087 yards and 10 touchdowns. He's averaging 7.7 yards per carry, basically in the last 5 games, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, Ole Gordon's amazing. In the preseason, we said this. This is, as much as we've hammered the coaching staff in Norman, Oklahoma State is 2-2 because Mike Gundy and Casey Dunn misevaluated what they had, and it's not the first time that Mike Gundy hasn't been able to put heads for tails coming out of fall camp. It's an issue that he's had historically his career. Oklahoma State should be unbeaten because they have Ole Gordon and because they should have just picked a quarterback and went with it. And Ole Gordon is proving them right, proving everyone who just yelled for the first 4 weeks right, because there was no excuse. Look at the Kansas game. What Ole Gordon did through the air, he's shown you he can be effective coming out of the backfield, whether he's getting the handoff or whether the ball's being thrown. So there should have been no excuse in the South Alabama game. Well, we got behind, so we can't run the football. He's the best player on your team. Him and Colin Oliver are the two best players. The defense hasn't had any issues saying, well, Colin Oliver needs to play. It's just ignorance, arrogance, whatever. It's a big game plan mismanagement through 4 games. And coming out of the bye week, Mike Gundy said this much, right? In his press conference, he's like, I went to the team and we said, we're sorry. Trust us. This is the game plan going forward. And they've won every game coming off that bye week. So it should have been no mystery to anyone. Everyone in Stillwater was yelling about it. And I'm just happy for Ole Gordon that he's getting those carries to show the kind of player he is, because he's an unbelievable runner. We mentioned it. Speed, agility, elusiveness in the open field, and just the want to. He's such a fun, violent runner. Like, you watch him and he wants to put his shoulder through a guy, run over him, and then run for 30 more yards and then sell. It's just a fun brand of football to watch. And just happy that we're getting to see that, because it was coaching malpractice the first 4 weeks that we didn't see it.
Coaching malpractice is exactly the 2 words I was going to use. Shout out the aliens still listening, by the way, after that one. What about a similar malfeasance maybe with the quarterback situation? You mentioned it, but they played 3 quarterbacks for 3 games, couldn't figure it out, tried different combinations, tried rolling them in rotationally, tried first half, second half, tried different guys. And then finally they just say, you know what? Let's give it to Alan Bowman, 6th-year senior, former starter at Texas Tech, was a freshman phenom before he got his lung collapsed against Oklahoma. Went to Michigan, didn't play, decided he wanted to come back to the Big 12. Ryan, since taking over, well, just in general, he's completed 57% of his passes, which is not great. It's not really very good at all. But he's collected 200 in the last 5 games since becoming starter, 278 yards, 235 yards, 336 yards, 210 yards, and 286 yards, despite the fact that he's only had 3 games this year over 60% completions. He's the best they've got. Why couldn't they recognize this before? And I'll tell you, but back to Mike Gundy's history, I used to cover them. You guys know 2002, 2003, when he was the offensive coordinator. And I was a columnist at The World from 2012 to 2016. So covered a lot of Mike Gundy press conferences, a lot of OSU games in those stretches. He's just not good at picking the right quarterback from time to time. Sometimes he'll pick the wrong guy entirely. And I think that's what happened here. He was trying to give everybody a chance when Alan Bowman was, to me, when he decided to transfer back from Michigan, that was your choice. That was your guy. Garrett Rangel and Gunnar Gundy had not played on his level. And maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe there was something in there in the evaluations that led the coaching staff to believe that this was going to be the year for those guys. But Bowman, to me, was always the choice.
Yeah, Mike Gundy's an elite developer. He's just not good at picking the right quarterback to start, which I think that actually played a role in this decision, that Mike Gundy actually tried to peel the curtain back and be a little self-aware and recognize that he's gotten that decision wrong a couple of times. And I in a weird way, for as much as I will hammer until give me another nail and I'll hammer again away at not using Ole Gordon, I think understand the psychology of what was happening here, even though he should have just gone to one quarterback sooner. The fact of the matter is, it's not like Alan Bowman had a ton of time, years and years and years, to have chemistry with the wide receivers. It's always a makeshift offensive line in Stillwater because Mike Gundy refuses to try to recruit ever. That's just not something he has any interest in. And so it's a group that, like, Bowman's not super mobile. They just needed to pick him so that they could say, this is what we want to do with our protection. He needs to get on the same page with the receivers. And you've seen the results. Like, he doesn't have to go out there and be a Heisman Trophy candidate. They have one of those in Ole Gordon. He just needs to take enough shots and take those shots when they're there to get the ball to Brennan Presley in stride on those swing passes out of the backfield and try to keep the defense honest instead of just committing every single hat to stopping Ole Gordon. And that's exactly what he's done. I think when Bowman came to Stillwater, they didn't expect him to be a 70% completion, throwing it all over the yard. They needed him to be exactly this, the modern game manager. Don't turn the ball over, take the deep shots that are there, keep the defense honest, and total credit to Bowman for staying locked in and keep it rolling. Credit to Mike Gundy and Casey Dunn for retooling how they attacked that passing game off the bye week since then. And that's going to be key. If Oklahoma could get a turnover early, I think you run the risk of exactly how Jeff Levy got into his shell and got scared. I think that Casey Dunn and Mike Gundy, we know how Mike Gundy coaches in this game more than any. It will become a conservative game plan, and it will be up to tackling. That may play right into what Oklahoma State wants to do, because, again, I'm not sold Oklahoma's going to tackle Ole Gordon well. But I think that that's kind of the path forward for Oklahoma in this game is you just got to be good against Bowman early, and I think Oklahoma State might go into the shell relying on Ole Gordon.
Also, I'll give you this, Ryan. I'm no coach, but I play one on the podcast. So here goes. Against South Alabama, Brennan Presley had 3 catches for 11 yards, L. Against Iowa State, he had 2 catches for 9 yards, L. He has had more catches, at least 4 catches every other game, except for last week when they were blowing out Cincinnati, but he still averaged 13 yards a catch in that game. If Oklahoma State wants to win, they'd be probably smart to get the ball to Brennan Presley. He's one of those guys. He's one of those guys on that receiver core. They've got some good receivers who are evolving and developing for sure. But he's one of them. To me, he's one of the keys to the game. But Oklahoma's defense is going to have its hands full, Ryan, to the point where, and we teased this earlier, you wrote a story on what to do about the linebackers, including the idea, and we talked about this, I think, on Saturday night, it might be time to shelve for now the Jaron Kanak experience.
Yeah, the number one thing with the linebackers is going to be Danny Stutzman, game time decision, what's he do, all that stuff. But you look at it, I've got the numbers in front of me here, and forgive me if you're watching the YouTube for me looking down at my army of sticky notes. But here you go. Kip Lewis, he's at 122 snaps per Pro Football Focus this year. 42 of those were against Kansas. He was the one that slotted in and played a huge role. His previous season highest was 19. He's had a missed tackle percentage this year per PFF of 13.8%. Only 4 missed tackles. Jaren Kanak, the starter, 25.4%, the missed tackle percentage. Kanak is over pursuing, which is leading him to have to either tackle high or arm tackle, and it's leading to missed tackles. So Kobe McKenzie, his percentage is just 18.2% on the season. He did not play as much as Kip did, credit with 10 snaps against Kansas. That's the same as he played against Tulsa. But Kobe is a lot bigger guy. He is someone that Brent Venables last year classified as, or the description was concrete in his helmet. That was Kobe. Deshaun McCullough talked about guys not hesitating. If Kobe McKenzie meets Ole Gordon in the gap, that has the potential to be atom splitting, combustion, because both those guys are going to want to hit each other. But for me, Kip Lewis, he's shown that he's the ball magnet, right? Brent Venables said he has performed. He's not afraid of contact. Look at what he did on the goal line against Texas, on the goal line against UCF. He was front and center. For me, he's got to be the guy. And also talking about, I asked Deshaun McCullough on that last drive, the communication, was that on Kip and Kobe and Jaren not getting guys set? Was that just the defense as a whole? Deshaun's like, none of that should have been on the linebackers. That was a full failure. Brent Venables, Danny Stutzman, when he joined Eddie and I on Monday, Deshaun McCullough, everyone has been very complimentary of mentally Kip and Kobe. They think both those guys are really, really smart. If Danny can play, I would go Stutzman and Kip Lewis and not think twice about it and let Jaren rotate in. If he can't, I'd probably go Kip and Jaren, but have a heavy rotation of Kobe McKenzie and see how the game plays out. Because, again, Oklahoma's been able to rally and do a lot better. You give up one big play, but it's not been a backbreaker. Ole Gordon will house it if you miss that first tackle. That's just going to happen at some point on Saturday. The sure-handed tacklers have been Kip and Kobe and Stutzman, not Jaren Kanak.
Yeah, if Oklahoma State plays it straight up like they have been the last few weeks, Oklahoma's going to need to run a 4-man front, 4 big guys with their hand on the ground, and possibly 3 real full-time linebackers, not Kendall Dobie rotating in, as the cheetah linebacker. Occasionally maybe a slot corner if they come out in 4 wides or something like that. But no, you're going to need a power formation defense. And for me, I'm with you. I think Kobe McKenzie brings that pop. And I think Brent also used the word at some point this year, a tackling machine, I believe, to describe Kip Lewis. So those guys are young. They're fearless. And I think they're ready to play. Ryan, last, Bedlam, how you feeling? Me, I hate it. I hate that this is the last Bedlam game that we're probably in my career. I'm old enough now. This might be the last Bedlam game I ever get to cover.
I know you do. I don't care one way or the other. These games are incredibly
ladies and gentlemen.
These games are uninteresting. Bedlam. I know what Mike Gundy says. Oh, Bedlam was Bedlam back in my day. Bedlam became Bedlam when the Big 12 was too dumb to realize that you could protect the Oklahoma and Nebraska rivalry and continue to play that year after year, even if they were on different sides. That is when the primetime rivalry real estate on Oklahoma's schedule got opened up. They had to slide something in there. It happened to be Bedlam. If Les Miles had stayed as the coach, maybe this would be a thing. Mike Gundy has an awful winning percentage in this game. 2 of those wins, one of them you needed Lincoln Riley foot out the door. The other one, he needed the re-kick. Like 2011 is the only time that you've had 2 just elite teams where both coaching staffs want to win the game. And Oklahoma State absolutely pantsed Oklahoma, embarrassed them. Otherwise, this will be a close game for a little bit. Oklahoma's probably going to pull away. Oklahoma is more talented. Brent Venables is a better, like his defensive coordinator record, that translates. He'll be a better coach than Mike Gundy will be. Mike Gundy's an elite developer. He is too conservative in this rivalry game, in this game. Brent Venables has already shown you, like Brent Venables just spotted 28 points and then didn't play for 3 quarters last year, and Oklahoma won the game anyway. So in this game, it's just incredibly uninteresting outside of the atmosphere in Stillwater. Like there will be better atmospheres that Oklahoma plays in for the first time next year because they actually have large stadiums and not ones that are limited by a basketball arena out one end zone. Like this is an incredibly uninteresting game. And I'll be happy to be done with it for more interesting contests like Tennessee and Florida and Georgia. Now, if that's the trade-off, you take that 100% of the time.
Yeah, I can't literally I'm stunned at how I can't disagree with anything you said. Everything you said was spot on except for one thing. This is an uninteresting game. This game's always interesting for one reason or another before or during the game. It always comes down to something happening, something weird, some kick got missed or some punt return got brought back or some quarterback came off the bench. It's always good drama, always good theater, and I'm going to miss it. I for one am going to miss it. But what you said is correct. We get to go to Gainesville. There may be some stinkers in Gainesville. There may be some stinkers in Knoxville. There may be some stinkers in, South Carolina and Nashville and so on and so forth. I'm going to miss this game. This has always been this is one of those moments on the college football's calendar every year that it's Sooner fans, sure. They are going to look at this game and say, it's little brother. We're going to pee all over them, right? Whatever. OU media and OSU media, we love this game. And I don't know why you don't love it.
I don't understand the infatuate. Like, you know what the result is going to be 9 times out of 10.
Which is fine, but it's
Kansas
still interesting
State
to get
has
there.
a better record against Oklahoma, especially since A&M, Colorado, Nebraska. Like, the Kansas State game, I'm way more interested in that every single time that plays. Manhattan and Stillwater are comparable atmospheres. Texas Tech and Baylor have been just as interesting. Like, it is what it is. What it is. I think it would be different if Mike Gundy acted like he cared at all to coach this game aggressively. Mike Gundy's a conservative coach, and this game is like the most conservative he is. I don't get it. I don't get the infatuation with it. Like, Oklahoma has a marquee rivalry game. It's OU Texas. This one is just like everyone's rabid when Oklahoma comes to town. It's just guaranteed to be sold out because Oklahoma State. In the SEC, all those games are going to be sold out. Like, the trade-off is not worth having two thoughts about losing Bedlam. Losing Bedlam in all the other sports, way different. Bedlam football, I will not miss it one bit. And when it happens, it'll make it even better when it pops up and happens in a bowl game, because then it can be the novelty of it as opposed to the year-to-year of like, Oklahoma just wins this game every
year. Yeah, you know what I'm not going to miss? I'm not going to miss the post-game trash talk, because that is lame, right? When your team wins, we're going to talk trash now. It's great. It's awesome that you get to talk trash to your coworkers, your neighbors, your family. That's the part we're going to lose, Ryan. That's the part we're going to lose, because what are we going to get on Reddit and talk trash to South Carolina fans, right? That's the way OU fans are looking at this thing now. It's like, who are we going to trash talk? My neighbors are big OSU fans. They got the flag and they got the curb painted and all this other stuff. How am I going to? I guess we'll just trash talk, because they lost to Kansas State this week or something. That's the part that I'm going to miss.
Better, because Oklahoma State fans can talk all the trash they want if Oklahoma doesn't win in the SEC, and they don't have that game at the end of the year that they just lose.
That's true. The 90% factor.
Yeah, it's like, again, this is here in the game notes, the most lopsided rivalry there is. We're not losing a thing. Don't worry. They can't even decide on a good trophy. Like, the Bedlam Bell was incredibly lame. And then they moved to the very just generic of like, it is a wiry state of Oklahoma that half the coaches in Norman don't even let their teams lift. Looking at you on the softball diamond. Like, that is a directive from the top. Do not lift that trophy. That doesn't mean anything to this program. Like, that is what you're losing, which is just another game.
We'll always have men's and women's basketball, probably softball and baseball.
Wrestling staying, the Big 12 wrestling. Oklahoma State is an affiliate program in Big 12 wrestling. Like, the places where it really matters, all the other sports except football, we're going to keep it. And it's going to be great. And like, Bedlam basketball rocks, Bedlam softball rocks, Bedlam baseball rocks. Bedlam football ain't a thing.
They're going to still do that lame trophy?
Sure. Like, can we get a better one? Like, I'll at least take the bell had personality. It was something other than just, here is the state of Oklahoma. Hand that thing out.
Yes. Hey, good stuff, Ryan. Appreciate you, man.
We'll see ya.
This segment of the AllSooners podcast was a long one, but it was presented by Infinite Asset Advisors. Just go to infiniteassetadvisors.com to learn how you can get debt-free and begin real retirement planning right now. Don't wait on this, folks, because whether it's retirement, private banking, family asset protection, estate planning, or living trusts, let Corey and his team take a look at your portfolio and get you on the way to taking control of your financial future. Call 512-710-0130 or email team@infiniteassetadvisors.com or just head over to their website, infiniteassetadvisors.com. Coming up next, we're going to hit recruiting with Randall. That's next on the AllSooners podcast. Okay, final segment of the AllSooners podcast. Remember, this is where I tell you, if you like the podcast, please like the podcast. Drop us a nice rating on your podcast platform, whatever it is. You know how to do it. 5 stars. Thank you very much. We appreciate it entirely. Please like us and share us on social media too. That really helps get the word out. Spread the word that the AllSooners podcast is bringing you guys something that you enjoy, and will strengthen the podcast and make us better because of it. Because the audience will grow, and then we'll be held more accountable. Because we like to be held accountable. Okay, I rambled enough. Let's get to Randall. Oh, don't forget YouTube. Like, subscribe, leave us a comment, mash that like button. I love saying that. I don't know why. It's so stupid. Randall has joined us. Randall, welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Have you thawed out from your freeze fest at it didn't ever reach freezing temperatures, but you were soaked to the bone on Saturday at Kansas?
Yeah, if you told me it didn't reach freezing temperatures in the moment, I might not have believed you. It definitely felt like it down there on the field. But we powered through. We were able to get everything we needed, and just thankful that this weekend the weather gods are giving us some great weather in Stillwater, or at least supposed to be.
Hey, you guys, do me a favor. Go to allsooners.com, click on the football tab at the top, and scroll down until you get to Randall's Kansas highlights. It's some of his best highlights that he shot of the entire season. This is his first year to do that. But I thought he had his best game shooting the highlights, despite the fact that there are highlights where you could tell he's just kind of shivering a little bit because it's so damn cold. But check that out and spread the word on those too. Click on the little share buttons at the bottom, Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Send those out because Randall sat there in the cold, in the rain, and through a 1 hour rain delay for you guys. So do that, please. Get to allsooners.com and look up his highlights, or just type up Oklahoma Kansas highlights AllSooners on the Google machine. They'll take care of you. All right, let's get into some recruiting, Randall. Alex Shield Knight is the most recent news, as well as a commitment from Reggie Powers. Holy cow. Busy week for the Sooners on the recruiting front, man.
Yeah, I mean, so you mentioned Reggie Powers, a hard-hitting safety from Ohio. Previously a Michigan State commit. Now this is a kid who has Ohio State offers, UCLA offers. I mean, very highly recruited player out of Ohio, which we've talked on this podcast before. The state of Ohio always produces football players. He's from Centerville, which is a program that has been very good in the state of Ohio for a while. Highly rated recruit, top 150 player in the country, depending on where you look. Great get for Brent Venables, Jay Valai, Brandon Hall, that defensive back room. I mean, they've got some good pieces in that 2024 class. I mean, Jaden Hardy is a very highly rated recruit. Again, some local kids, Eli Bowen, Michael Patterson McDonald, but Reggie Powers offers something completely different from those guys. I mean, hard-hitting box safety who will really lay the wood. And I think that Sooner fans, I think Brent Venables, Brandon Hall is going to really like what they get out of Reggie Powers. Visited when OU played UCF. A week from that day, committed to OU. Seems like he liked what he saw when he was in Norman. And then you mentioned Alex Shield Knight, a guy who's committing a week from this Friday on November 10th. He goes to Wagner High School, Wagner, Oklahoma. May sound familiar to anyone who's watched Hard Knocks or Oklahoma State football. Malcolm Rodriguez, former Oklahoma State linebacker, now plays for the Lions. He also hails from Wagner, Oklahoma. But Shield Knight, 3-star recruit, could probably be rated a little higher if he was playing at a bigger school or maybe in a different state. I know people kind of have that hang up sometimes, but this is a kid Arkansas offers, Texas A&M offers, some good schools, SEC programs that are in on this guy. And again, local recruiting would be huge for Brent Venables to land a commitment from Shield Knight, about 6'3", 225 right now. From everything I know, he's a real technician on the defensive line. Does play some tight end in high school too. Will probably be an edge rusher in college. And again, set to decide next Friday before Wagner's regular season finale. Right now, Wagner's undefeated. They'll play Broken Bow in that game. Should be a fun matchup, but I would anticipate that will go very well for the Sooners. That commitment, I would just imagine he ends up picking OU.
Yeah, Shield Knight is fascinating to me. He's like you said, a 3-star. It took him a while to get the offer. He's going to commit when the time is right for him. But holy cow, this kid is incredibly talented
Yeah.
and very versatile. Plays multiple positions, like you said. If you watch his highlights, he's out there split out as a kind of a slot receiver and end of line, not connected tight end.
Yeah.
But you mentioned edge rusher, probably edge rusher, right? Throw some more pounds on him, but he looks to me like Deshaun McCullough. Looks like a ideal cheetah linebacker who can drop into coverage, go get the quarterback, stuff the run at the line of scrimmage. He looks like he's got a lot of tools.
And we've seen that might be when he gets on campus, that might be something that Brent Venables and company take a look at, when they see the athleticism, like you said, the versatility, that might be a spot where they start to think, well, this is a guy who could fill that cheetah role for us. You mentioned the size. He is kind of in that tweener area where he's right now similar to what Justin Harrington, Jaden Rowe weighs, about 6'3", 220, maybe a little heavier than those guys. And again, once he gets to a college weight program, they can pack some more weight on. But I think you're right that his versatility could lend itself to him playing some of that cheetah position, really playing multiple positions to kind of get on the field earlier. You mentioned him rushing the passer. He is Wagner's all-time leading sack leader, achieved that a few weeks ago, which for a guy who's a junior is pretty impressive. And like we said,
Wow.
Wagner's not just, some small town program out in the middle of nowhere. They've produced NFL players, multiple NFL players. And so, to be able to do that, obviously he's got some skill.
Yeah, Wagner's a unit in high school football around here, man. They're scary good.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk a little more Reggie Powers. He committed to Michigan State when Michigan State still had Mel Tucker. And Mel Tucker, I think, was coming off a really good season and was coming off that big $100 million contract or $95 million contract, whatever it was. So he's committing, or he had committed, I should say, to a program that was absolutely on the rise. I mean, By Joe went to Michigan State at this time, right? And Reggie Powers commits to them a year later, and it's like, oh wow, what a great get for them. Now he's coming to Oklahoma. Kind of changes the dynamic a little bit of that defensive back room to me.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, with him probably being a safety, also Jaden Hardy probably playing safety at the next level. And those are two high 4-star, mid 4-star defensive backs that are big, long, lengthy, and rangy. I mean, and like I said earlier, Powers will come down and he will hit guys. He loves to lay the wood. I mean, if you look at his season statistics, he's got about 70 tackles in, I think, 10 games, which again, he's probably not playing all 4 quarters of each of those games, and he's playing safety. Usually your safeties aren't leading the team in tackles unless the team's not very good. His team is very good. So obviously he's doing something right. His pass breakup interception numbers aren't gaudy. When you look at them, it doesn't catch your eye like, holy smokes, he's, picking off every pass they throw his way. But if they're running the ball to his side, he's going to come down. He's going to lay a hit and run coverage. And that kind of is reminiscent of a guy like Michael Patterson McDonald, who from Westmore, not as big as Reggie Powers. Powers, I think, is about 6'2". But Michael Patterson McDonald kind of has some of the same mentality, play style, where he will come down and lay a hit in the run game. He's not afraid of contact. They don't shy away from stuff like that. And I think that that's something that Brent Venables, Brandon Hall, they really value in their safeties. I mean, we've seen that with the guys who are playing this year. I mean, Key Lawrence, Reggie Pearson, Billy Bowman, those guys, all of them are not afraid to run up and nail a guy in run defense, or if he catches a short pass over the middle. I think Reggie Powers fits that to a T.
What's Marcus James going to do? He's from Carl Albert. He's got a decision coming tomorrow. He's going to announce tomorrow. But what's he going to do ultimately? Because you see one recruiting service says he's an athlete. Another one says he's a tight end. Another one says he's a linebacker. Kid's incredibly talented, has amazing athletic ability. And when he hits you, you go backwards almost every time. So what's Oklahoma want to do with him ultimately, and is he going to, do you think, commit to OU tomorrow?
So you mentioned, great athlete, very well rounded. I mean, he can play, like you said, tight end. He can play off ball linebacker. He starts at both sides of the ball for Carl Albert, which is one of the top teams in the state of Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the top team in Oklahoma outside of Bixby. And I mean, he caught the game-winning touchdown pass against Guthrie, which was an undefeated team whose defense has been outstanding all season. I think he had 2 touchdowns in that game. But from what I understand, OU really likes him at linebacker. This is a guy who 6'4", about 215, 220 right now. And so obviously to play linebacker at the next level, he will need to put on some weight. But again, this is a guy who's only a junior in high school. He's easily capable of putting on that weight. And you see that he's plenty strong right now when you watch him play. I mean, I've got videos of him playing tight end for Carl Albert and just blocking the heck out of some dudes. I mean, he is physical. He's not afraid to mix it up with those guys. And again, that's something that Brent Venables and this defensive staff, they love. They want guys who are not afraid to go put their nose in the middle of the play. And from everything I've seen from Marcus James, he's not afraid to go stick his nose in the play. Again, I think that his ranginess, his size, I think that really lends itself well to him playing linebacker at the next level. But again, you mentioned he's versatile. If linebacker doesn't work out, then he could always try tight end. I would assume he released his top 5 a few weeks ago. Texas A&M, Arkansas, Utah, Oklahoma. I'm blanking on one. Oh, TCU, I think, is the 5th in that top 5. I would assume that OU is not assume. I believe that OU is a big leader right there right now. Again, this is someone that they were pretty early on, a local kid. They've done really well with recruiting Carl Albert already. Obviously, they've already got commitments from Kevin Sperry in that 2025 class, Xavier
Mm-hmm.
Robinson in the 2024 class. OU's working on Trinae Washington, Tristan Hayes as we speak. I mean, every day. And so I would expect that tomorrow I'll be there at Carl Albert. So check out on AllSooners tomorrow at around 7:00. But I would assume that Marcus James tomorrow night will be a Sooner. And I think that when he gets to OU, his position will probably be linebacker.
Okay. So just to clarify, he's a 2025.
Yes.
If he does play defense in that 2025 class, he would be the Sooners' second player committed right now in the 2025 class, along with Kamari Moore from Lee Summit North, defensive tackle. The rest of those dudes are wide receivers and quarterbacks.
Yes.
So Sooners got some I don't know about work to do, but they've made some hay. Emmett Jones and those guys, especially, have made some hay on the offensive side of the football. If he plays tight end, that would probably really bolster the receiver core. That would probably make his high school quarterback, Kevin Sperry, very happy, right? As well as maybe one or possibly 2 of his teammates. But my guess is same as yours. He's probably going to play linebacker, outside linebacker, possibly cheetah. You get those big 6'3", 220 guys, and you put them at cheetah, and you see what they can do, and you say, if you can grasp what's going on at cheetah, right? What the inner workings of the defense and what the offense is setting up, what they're trying to do. If you can do that, if you can mentally grasp that, then you're like a quarterback. You've got a handle on just about every other position.
Yeah.
That's what Brent Venables expects from his cheetahs.
And I mean, it may to people watching this, it may seem like, oh, we're just throwing every name out there for cheetah. But if you remember, I mean, a lot of these guys, when they come to college, that's kind of the roadmap for them, especially if you're an athletic guy who's kind of a tweener.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when Jaron Kanak committed to Oklahoma, a lot of people pegged him as a future cheetah because he was a guy who was 6'3", who was really, really fast. I mean, 10-300 in high school. He
played cheetah last year.
Right. And so now he's kind of moved from that cheetah role to a more traditional inside linebacker role. So there's nothing to say that when these guys get to college, they won't start out trying to learn that cheetah position. Like you said, learn more of the defense. And if it doesn't succeed there, then guys like Michael Boganowski, guys like Alex Shieldknight, guys like Marcus James, they can all move to their original positions, which they played in high school. These are very versatile athletic guys.
Yep. Good call. Sooners could be getting, and we don't know when he's going to announce but he dropped his top 8. Was it yesterday? Yeah, it was yesterday because I was driving home from Norman from the Tuesday press conference. No surprise whatsoever, but certainly a step in the right direction for Oklahoma. Isaiah Mosey, wide receiver out of Kansas City, his dad, of course, there at Lee Summit North, is Jamar Mosey, former Sooner running back. Isaiah has been leaning, I think we can say, toward Oklahoma, but the Sooners are going to have to close on him. I get the feeling because Oregon is in there as well. Oregon is one of his top schools. He's got a top 8. He dropped his top 8 yesterday. And I think Oregon is probably the number one competitor. It has been for the last few weeks or last few, maybe even months, going back to the preseason game they had here at Union High School when I went out there and asked him about it. Oregon's on that list. Oklahoma's on that list. He's got a decision to make, but Oklahoma's going to have to close on him.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. This is a guy who, throughout the summer, I would probably have said that OU is the clear leader for Isaiah Mosey. But now, the way things sit in that 2025 class, you kind of have to wonder if things have changed there. And like you said, they're not out of the race. It's definitely a battle between Oklahoma and Oregon from what I've seen right now. With 3 receivers already committed in 2025, that can help and it can hurt OU. I mean, if you angle it as, well, hey, we really want you in this class, but you're going to have to take your spot before someone else does, then, that might be a way that you can get him to commit earlier, or that might push him away because, like we mentioned, you've got 4-star wide receiver Grayson Harris, who's been committed since April. You've got 4-star wide receiver Jaden Nickens, who's from Oklahoma City and committed to the Sooners this summer. You've got 4-star wide receiver Elijah Thomas, who's from Shakota, grew up an OU fan and committed to the Sooners this summer as well. I mean, those are 3 guys that Kevin Sperry, I've seen it firsthand. Those are 3 guys that Kevin Sperry has a great relationship with. And I would, especially right now, I think that those 3 guys are solid, that OU really likes those guys. Now, we've seen in the 2024 class, Emmett Jones, Brent Venables, OU, they don't mind taking a handful of receivers. I think they've got 6 in 2024. So if Isaiah Mosey does want to commit, he would be the 4th receiver in the class. I don't think OU would have any hangups with that, especially given the fact that he's top 10 receiver in the country, top 60, top 50 player in the country in the 2025 class. His dad, like you mentioned, Oklahoma legacy player. He's a 2025 teammate with Kamori Moore, who we already mentioned, is committed to OU in the 2025 class. As much as people probably don't want to hear it, his other teammate, Will Nwaneri, considered the Sooners heavily, potentially still is heavily considering the Sooners. We're not really sure there yet. But again, there's a lot of relationships between Lee Summit North, between the Moseys with OU, and that's not going to go away. OU, like you said, they're going to have to close, but they're in a good spot now if they can fend off Oregon, who Mosey visited Oregon over the summer. He visited OU over the summer. The same weekend that Kamori Moore committed, Isaiah Mosey was on campus. So, again, like you mentioned, OU is going to be in a dogfight with Oregon for this one. A lot of time left, but it seems right now like those are kind of the two top dogs there.
Yeah, Jamar is his coach. Jamar is his dad. I think Jamar, I'm not trying to speak for him, but I think he would love for his son to go to OU where he went to school, right? He had a great experience there. I think he would love for his son to go there as well. That's a part of it. I think the OU coaching staff would love, because they coached Jamar and they want to keep that relationship alive with that pipeline to Lee Summit North.
Great program.
I think they would enjoy having that legacy player come back to Oklahoma. He's a very good player. He's not just some schlub who's going to walk on, right? He's hey, Dad, would it be okay if I went to OU because you played? That's not, this kid's legit. He's a very good player.
Yep.
But does he want to go to OU or does he want to go to Oregon? Does OU want him, or do they want 1 or 2 other 4-star / 5-star type receivers? That's where it's going to come down to. Again, he dropped his top 8 yesterday. We'll have to continue to follow that as it unfolds. Have to put a call into Jamar and see what he's thinking, or at least ask him what Isaiah's thinking. Maybe that's the best way to say it. 2 offensive linemen are still out there, Randall. Grant Brix, Eddie Pierre-Louis. One visited 2 weeks ago for the game against UCF, Eddie Pierre-Louis from Florida. Grant Brix is in Oklahoma this week. He's visiting a college in Oklahoma this week. Is that right?
That's what we've been told in passing. We'll wait to see until Saturday if that remains the truth or not.
Yeah.
But a certain blue and gold school in northern Oklahoma, I hear, will get a visit from Grant Brix this weekend. We'll see.
He's visiting TU. He's apparently, reportedly, supposedly, he's visiting the Golden Hurricane. But there's a reason for that.
Yeah, we've been told that he's got an old high school friend or a teammate or something that is either taking a visit or plays for TU, going out there to see him. Not even sure that TU's technically offered him yet. Now I'm sure if he says, "Hey, I'm interested," that offer would come very quickly. But I don't think that Sooner fans necessarily have to worry about Tulsa in that recruitment. Now I don't think it's a cut and dry case for OU. It hasn't been this whole time. This has been something that it's kind of been an OU and Nebraska battle. I mean, we talked, I think last week or previously, that he really values his family. He really values being close to home. He's a very low key person. So, I mean, he's got Alabama offers. He's got all the big schools in the country. I mean, this is one of the top 50 players, top 3 interior offensive linemen in the country. Everyone wants him. He's very low key. He's not going to be persuaded by, as Devon Jordan would put it, he's not going to be persuaded by the logo on the helmet. This is someone that knows what he wants, and he's just kind of deciding. I think, from what I understand, I don't want to speak for him. From what I understand, kind of knows what's important to him and is deciding between 2 schools that can offer different things. Now, Nebraska is seemingly building in the right direction with Matt Rule, and it's only about 90 miles from his hometown. And from what I understand, the kid who's really low key, likes his family, wants to stay close to home, being only 90 miles away, it's a huge plus. I mean, that's shorter than Oklahoma City to Dallas, right? Norman's about 7 hours. He's in Logan, Iowa. Norman's about 7 hours from Logan, Iowa. Now, it's not the longest. It's not. I mean, we've seen kids come from Florida to go to OU, from the Northeast to come to OU, but I mean, it's just a fact. 7 hours is a lot longer than 90 miles. The relationships he has at OU with the coaching staff, with the strength staff, the offensive line coaches are very good, and that's what's keeping OU in it. The Bill Bedenbaugh track record, I think, is going to really help OU. But like we've seen, Nebraska is not pulling their foot off the gas. They know that they can see bricks within their grasp, and Rule and company does not want to lose a talented recruit like that when they're in the mix for him. I'm sure a lot of people on Twitter saw they parked their huge 18-wheeler semi out in front of his high school. I don't know Grant Brix personally, so I don't know whether that's something that really moves him. Personally, I mean, it's pretty cool, but I don't know in 2023 how much a big 18-wheeler is persuading high school kids. Again, who knows? This is a kid from Logan, Iowa. Maybe it's different. I don't know. But point being, Nebraska's not taking their foot off the gas. They're pulling out all the stops. They're doing everything they can to get this guy in their class. 2024 offensive lineman. I think it's going to come down to the wire. From what I've been told, he's going to take one last visit to Nebraska before he decides. And so OU really just needs to maintain contact. And from everything I've heard, OU recently took the lead for him. And if they can do that if OU still seems to be in the lead after that visit to Nebraska, then I would think that that's when we know what his final decision will be. But until then, it's a battle.
So if I were Grant Brix, I don't know what I would do. If you love the coaching staff at Oklahoma, or you love the championship tradition at Alabama, and you love being close to home so your parents and family can come and watch you play, what do? It's the age and era of the transfer portal, man. Make a decision, stick with it, and if it doesn't work out, if you don't love it in Tuscaloosa or you don't love it in Norman, you've got the transfer portal send you right back home. You can play for Nebraska, you can play for Iowa. You know what I mean? I mean, you can play anywhere you want. Again, in this age of the transfer, instantaneous. Yep. If you hate it, you don't get along, the resources are not what you want, or the relationships are not what you wanted, portal that baby.
Yep.
It's a lot easier to make those decisions now, I would think, as a high level recruit than it used to be, simply because of the portal.
And I would say that OU is probably using that same line of thinking to their advantage, saying, hey, just come to Norman. And if doesn't end up being what you like, you're not stuck here. But we think that if you do come here, you'll want to stay.
Yeah.
And
If you don't love it, you got to love it. If you don't love it, then do
yep,
something that you do love.
yep. One last thing on him. A few weeks ago, probably a month and a half ago, he was wearing Nebraska gloves at one of his high school games. But as we've seen with multiple recruits in this cycle,
Yeah.
that could mean absolutely nothing. So
Right. And
we'll see.
let me just say this. Kevin Wilson has coached a lot of offensive line in his time. He's no dummy. He's a very smart coach. When he sees Grant Bricks on his campus, if that takes place this weekend, he's going to offer him. So Tulsa has entered the conversation. Tulsa has entered the chat.
Wouldn't that be quite the story?
That would be hilarious. Maybe he gets there and he likes the academics. My daughter loved it there.
Yeah, Tulsa advocate John Hoover.
That's right. Who knows? Eddie Pierre Louis, what do you think? He's got the coming off the visit from 2 weeks ago. They didn't play their best, but this is one of those situations where Bill Beedenbow pulls him aside after the game and says, "Did you see those guys play out there? That's why we need you right now."
And
easy recruiting pitch.
Yeah, and we mentioned when we talked with Daniel Akinkumi, he told us after the Arkansas State game, Bill Beedenbow took him into his office. They watched the entire game, and Daniel said that he was surprised by how in-depth and how rigorous Beedenbow was with watching the film. Now, if Beedenbow was like that after a 73-0 victory, imagine what he was like watching the film with Eddie Pierre Louis after a 2-point victory against Central Florida. Right. So if Pierre Louis is a guy who is attracted to that coaching style, then I'm sure that that opportunity to watch the film, kind of diagnose what went wrong, diagnose, like you said, hey, here's where you can help. Here's where your skill set would be perfect on our offensive line. This play right here works because you do these things well. And so, like you mentioned, it's a great recruiting pitch, especially from a guy who can point to that poster of all the Sooners in the NFL and say, I produced a lot of those guys, and the highest paid ones are all from my position group. Yep. And so Pierre Louis is an interior offensive lineman, considering UCF, considering OU, again, from Tampa. So it's always going to be hard to get a kid from Tampa, pull him away from his hometown. But like we've mentioned in past podcasts, OU's recruited Tampa really well recently. Will Griffin, who we talked about before the podcast, a 2026 quarterback from Tampa, has been to Norman this year. Lewis Carter is a Tampa kid. There's a few other kids from Tampa that OU's been recruiting. I think that Brent Venables and the coaching staff's background in the Southeast, coaching in the Southeastern United States, has really helped develop a relationship with the current coaching staff to that area. And I think that that's really helping the Sooners recruit there well. I think that Pierre Louis is probably leaning towards OU, which was not always the case, but it is a bit interesting that after that visit, we still haven't seen a commitment come. Maybe that comes a little bit down the line. Maybe he's waiting till signing day. I don't know exactly the timetable, but I would assume that right now OU is in the driver's seat. He'd be a big addition. Him and Bricks are, still in the mix for right now. They've got 4 offensive linemen, so if they could add 2 of them, that'd be 6 in the class, which is plenty. Gives you plenty of depth. Even if you can only get 1, having 5 guys in the class is still pretty good depth for the future.
Now, according to Will, what was his name from Tampa?
Griffin,
yeah. According to 24/7 Sports, the only quarterback that they've offered in the 26 class remains Legend Bay, the 5'11" speedster that probably would play another position, we think. So they're, I guess that offer hasn't been made yet officially. When it does, we'll probably hear from Will Griffin on social media.
Yes, I would assume so. And, there's a few other quarterbacks that OU's in the 2026 class that OU's had on campus this year. Connor Quintero from Stillwater, CJ Turnbull from Millwood in Oklahoma City. So they're doing their due diligence. They're bringing these guys in. I would imagine that soon we start to see those 2026 QB offers roll out. Kind of surprised that we haven't yet.
Yeah, me too. So right now, OU is number 6 in the Rivals team rankings. That's down a spot from number 5 last time we talked about it. Number 7 in the 24/7 Sports team rankings. That's down a spot. But they're up to number 9 in the On3 team rankings, which is up a spot from last time they were number 10. So they're in that consensus top 10 area, top 5 to 10 area, 6 to 10, I guess in this case.
Yeah.
That's where it sits, and they have a chance to move up. And Randall, they have a chance to move up due to some hashtag OK preps that are out there. This recruiting weekend belongs to Oklahoma State. It's their game in the Bedlam game. They're going to use it as a recruiting
Oh yeah.
Showcase. Hey, look what we can do, especially if they were to come out and win the game, right? They would host those guys. They would tell a lot of local kids, hey, don't worry about them. Don't worry about the SEC. If you're thinking about Oklahoma, look what we've got going on here at Oklahoma State and Stillwater. They're going to be able to recruit head to head in a handful of cases, I think, Randall. What do you think about how this Bedlam game could play into that?
I think that you hit the nail on the head. I mean, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, especially under Brent Venables now, are recruiting a lot of the same kids. I mean, we've seen Brent Venables tap back into this local recruiting. I mean, all over the state of Oklahoma in his one of his first classes, grabbing Eric McCarty from McAllister. Now they've gotten in on some OK Preps guys that they might not have previously been, or that they are battling head to head with Oklahoma State. I mean, Devon Jordan was a guy who liked Oklahoma State a lot, ended up picking Oklahoma in the 2024 class. There's some other guys out there. I think Alex Shieldknight, who, like we said, will commit next week. I think he's got an offer from Oklahoma State, so that might be one that the Sooners and the Pokes are battling on. But just in general, they're going to be Oklahoma State are always going to be fighting for a lot of the same in-state recruits. And this being the last Bedlam, it kind of gives you gives the winning program a nice little edge for the foreseeable future. To be able to say, hey, like you said, don't worry about that program. The last time we played them, we beat them. Do you want to come here and do you want to come to Oklahoma where we're going to the SEC, or do you want to come to Oklahoma State where we're staying put, we're staying true to the state of Oklahoma, to the region, to the Big 12, whatever the case may be. I think that obviously bragging rights are up for grabs every time these two programs play. It's big in the state of Oklahoma, but I mean, recruiting, being able to have that edge and say, hey, even when OU was 7-1 heading to the SEC, we knocked them down, knocked them off their high horse. Or Oklahoma being able to say, yeah, I mean, we dominated that rivalry for years, and now we're on to bigger and better things in the SEC. Come join the SEC, things like that. Obviously, the recruiting pitches will go both ways, but this final Bedlam matchup, final for this foreseeable future at least, will, I think, play a big impact on Sooner State recruiting. And we've mentioned the 2025 class in Oklahoma, the 2026 class in Oklahoma. They're really solid. They've got a lot of good players that both these teams are going to want. And I imagine that trend will continue going down the road.
Let me ask you this. You'll break the tie. You going to miss the Bedlam rivalry, or are you going to not miss the Bedlam rivalry?
100% I'm going to miss it. I think Bedlam is really fun. I'm a big fan of, the fun in-state. Obviously there's Oklahoma, Texas, which is a huge rivalry in itself, but I think the how close all these fans are. You work with a bunch of Oklahoma State fans probably. You probably won't work with a bunch of Texas fans. I think that adds a lot of fun to it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. When Oklahoma goes to the SEC, OU fans are not going to have SEC fans in their neighborhood.
Yep.
Walking their dog and, hey man, how'd you like the game Saturday? You can't do that anymore when you're not playing Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that part about Bedlam. So you broke the tie, Ryan. Sorry, not missing the Bedlam game, being apathetic about the Bedlam game does not suit you, my man. Even for a native Oklahoman, a Norman kid who probably had to suffer through a couple of humiliating weeks of Bedlam off-season talk, trash talk. No, sorry. Bedlam series is over after this week, and we're going to miss you. Long live Bedlam. I got nothing else, Randall. You got any more recruiting updates, or shall we take this thing into the ether?
I think that's it. Just keep it locked with AllSooners tomorrow night. See what Marcus James does. Around 6:37, somewhere in that time range. We'll have all the info here.
Good stuff, man. Thanks.
Thank you, Hoover.
And thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week on the AllSooners Podcast. Don't forget the AllSooners post-game podcast Saturday night after the Bedlam game from the press box, so it's certified fresh. You can find all those shows on Apple, Google, Spotify, Podbean, iHeart, or just about anywhere you listen to your podcasts. If you have an Amazon-enabled device, just say, Alexa, play the AllSooners Podcast. It's also posted on our website, allsooners.com. Just click on the player and listen on your phone, your tablet, or your computer. And of course, all our shows are posted on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. For Ryan Chapman, Bedlam Hater, and Randall Sweet, Bedlam Lover, I'm John Hoover, Bedlam Lover. We'll see you guys.